Before, we used to see, oh, if I have to become resilient and climate smart, I'm going to have to spend a lot of money and it doesn't make business sense. Now it actually sets you apart. You're less dependent on fuel. So a crisis in the Middle East does not increase your operating costs because you have green energy.
What worries you about the future of the African continent, and what gives you hope as well?
The transactional nature of a lot of the relationships that our countries are entering into, just from a critical minerals perspective, from a health MOU perspective, I think we must not lose humanity. The ability to see people, especially the most vulnerable, every single day as we design, as we plan, as we aspire, as we climb, as we achieve. Do not leave those who need us the most behind. We're called for such a time as this to create inclusive growth that carries everyone along, especially our children.
Welcome to Sustainably Speaking Africa, a podcast about reshaping narratives around sustainability and climate action in Africa. This podcast is brought to you by the Kenya Climate Innovation Centre and is made at Semabox. Join us for this and other episodes as we talk to industry leaders, frontline communities, and the innovators who are accelerating the progress towards a greener, sustainable future.
I have to begin by saying how proud I am of your work and how your mind works. I listened to you at the Africa Exchange 2025, and one of the most profound things you said that stayed with me was scale what works, not just the work. And that in the development sector, in governments, private sector, that people need to leave their egos and logos at the door. And I just want you to, as we begin this conversation, why that's so important and what informs the kind of fragmentation we are seeing in the across different sectors, and how we can get to that future where we are not just scaling the work, we are scaling what works, and we are able to, leave our logos and egos at the door, which is easier said than done. Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me, and it's an honor and privilege. And the fact that you remember my talk from last year gives me so much joy. Yeah. I would say that a lot of people enter this sector motivated by wonderful ideas and passions that then sometimes get in the way of progress. Many of us are motivated by a desire to change lives, by a desire to improve our world and ourselves. And we're also dependent on funders. And that creates a dynamic that often then becomes almost a hindrance. The passion where we come and innovate, and we are not very happy or comfortable sharing that what we thought was the answer ended up not being the answer. In my book on food entrepreneurs in Africa, I talk about peeling the onion. You think you're trying to solve one problem. As you peel the onion, you find that there's another problem and another problem and another problem. And the root cause of that problem, your solution is just treating symptoms. And that willingness to say, you know what, it's not working, requires humility, a willingness to say, let me go and redraw. Let me see who else is doing it better. Let me learn from them. Takes an inordinate amount of humility. But what propels that humility is a desire to say, I'm not here for myself. I'm here for the most vulnerable. Those who I'm coming to serve. It's not about me. Take yourself out of that equation. And that's the first key transformation that has to occur internally. The second is really realignment with funders. And funders have the same challenge. They want to put their flag on something and say, oh, I started the climate movement. Oh, I started the energy access movement. Oh, I led this big bet. And that flag sometimes doesn't sit very well on that hill. And oftentimes that flag is on the wrong hill. Or for sustained impact, you need to galvanize other funders. You need to galvanize local ownership. And the willingness to share the spotlight is critical. One of my favorite quotes is one by a former US president that says, it's amazing what we can accomplish if we don't care who gets the credit. That is so important. It's a lesson I've learned in this sector. if we want to go far and fast together, we should not care who gets the credit for the impact and the work, provided it is in the ecosystem and it's making a difference on the lives of the most vulnerable. So that is really critical to moving this sector forward, and especially now on our continent, where we have a lot of people who want to advance agendas. Are these the right agendas? Who has set the agendas? Who is the agenda serving? And ultimately, what will the agenda achieve? And if we can answer those questions with humility and honesty, we might reframe the work we're doing and oftentimes have to go back to the drawing board and bring others along to do it better and to do it faster and to ensure that it really drives impact.
I think no one could have put it any better. I was listening to one of your several speeches and presentations, and you mentioned that you are driven by what makes you angry, and in this particular context, you mentioned rage. I don't know whether it's rage for change or something like that. In this particular context, where we find ourselves in, multilateralism is no longer what it used to be. Supply chains are being redrawn. Energy systems are changing across the world. Food systems are changing. We've seen countries affected by the Russia-Ukraine war because of dependency on wheat, on fertilizers and all that. In this moment in time, what makes you angry? And what worries you about the future of the African continent, and what gives you hope as well?
That's a loaded question. We'll have to take it piece by piece.
You can peel it like the onion.
Yes, like the onion, yes. I would say the first thing is, as I look at the current state of affairs, I mean, we have an urgent crisis at the moment, not just linked to our health indicators, which are starting to fall back. But also, you mentioned Russia, Ukraine, but we're actually dealing with a Middle East crisis that has not only increased fuel prices across the world, but affecting fertilizer prices on the continent. For a continent that is heavily dependent on these two sources to drive growth. Transportation costs are increasing, food prices are increasing, which will also affect our nutrition dynamics. So I look at the ecosystem and I'm worried about those trends. I'm also worried about the transactional nature of a lot of the relationships that our countries are entering into, just from a critical minerals perspective, from a health MOU perspective. We're seeing some very worrying signs that countries are getting into long-term relationships that their grandchildren will ultimately have to bear the brunt of. And that transactional nature is also quite disastrous and could lead to a reverse of some of the growth trends we've seen. And then the third thing that worries me is that as a continent, and I can say this on African soil, we often are not speaking with one voice about the issues that matter. And some of our institutions that should be representing us at the highest levels are not galvanizing that shared sense of urgency and united voice, because that will address the first two issues that I mentioned. If you have the African Union, if you have the RECs, the regional economic communities, speaking with one voice, then we can negotiate for bilateral and multilateral relationships more effectively. We can negotiate trade terms. We can negotiate loan terms. We can demand for equal access. We can demand for value addition for our critical minerals. We can demand for value addition for ag commodities. We can set the prices and say, come and play on this continent or leave. But where we're not speaking with one voice, we create divergent interests, and there's a divide and conquer mentality that can occur very easily that set us back. So these are the things that worry me. And what is required at this time, number one, is a united voice on issues that matter. And this is a wake-up call for those who care deeply about this continent. And it's not just the political leaders, but it's faith leaders, business leaders, our celebrity voices, our youth voices. All actors have a critical role to play in galvanizing that united voice that is needed at this time. We cannot let this crisis go to waste. A crisis is a terrible thing to waste. And this one is one we cannot waste, which means that right now we need to have a very clear vision. The African Union Vision 2063
Yeah.
is still very relevant today, but the implementation of that vision has been very slow.
Yeah.
We called in the earlier session for an African currency. That is in Vision 2063. There's so many aspects of what we demand today that are in that vision, but they've been slow in being implemented. What gives me hope is that we have a few agencies and organizations that are stepping in. Under Dr. Sidi's leadership of the African Development Bank, we see a renewed call for a unified agenda of our financial institutions that are regional, that are continental, where we're going to collectively lower the cost of financing in Africa for Africans and galvanize resources on the continent. That gives me hope. The Africa Finance Corporation and AfriExim are also partnering with many actors, not only to galvanize diaspora funding, but also to address this cost of capital issue. And they're partnering with organizations that care deeply about this to change narratives, but also should demonstrate success and trust, which is required for fair financing and an ecosystem. And then the third is the young innovators. At the One campaign, we have this Future Makers campaign. And it's such a delight to showcase examples of young people who are shaping the future, not just for their countries, but for the world. And the ability to elevate those stories not only inspires me, but inspires the rest of the world that we're not waiting, we're leading. And I think we need more of those amplified every single day.
And that's why we're having this conversation. I know you're coming from a perspective of, narrative shaping and advocacy. And you mentioned that Africa needs to speak with one voice. Usually when most people complain about the narrative about Africa, the focus is always external, how we are perceived, how we are seen, and all that. But what do you see as the biggest impediment to the continent speaking in one voice? In me not thinking of you in terms of the Nigerian flag and you thinking of me as a Kenyan, or stopping opportunities from going to a Tanzanian or a South African. What must be reimagined or redone in the continent to make sure that even the narratives internally, we achieve that sort of collective vision?
Well, I would say that when you look at one sector that has transcended borders, it's culture. Today, I've seen walking in the hallways to women wearing Nigerian fashion. They look fantastic. And we're sitting in Nairobi, and they're Kenyans, proudly wearing designers from the Nigerian fashion landscape. And that is an example of how we can unite. Music is being played across the continent, and people don't say, oh, that's because it's Nigerian music, I won't play it. They love the music. I always say excellence and integrity have no hiding place. Culture transcends, and it's an entry point to unite us, right? The narrative of what we can present as Africans together is around what works and what needs to be amplified. Now, where we see that breaking down is where egos and logos get in the way and where people are transactional about what they can benefit. I believe in growing the pie. And if we look at trade within the continent, just between African countries, it's 16%. Trade between Africa and the rest of the world, our contribution to global trade is between 2 to 3%. That is unacceptable, right? And so if we see growing the pie, gosh, how can we go from 16% to 50%? How can we grow from 3% to 10%? That ability to see the benefits of enlarged opportunities for everyone, where a bigger pie allows us to all benefit, removes the crab mentality, pull her down, pull him down. If you get ahead, I don't. And so I think for me, it's redrawing what that future can be and the opportunities for us to grow and share together, and then allowing people to see their role in that future. And this is where the organizations like the African Union, the regional economic groups have a critical role to play. Because if you see your focus on an election cycle, and the money that you would chop in this election cycle to prepare you to win the next one, you have lost the plot. So that redrawing the stakes and the opportunities is critical. And that's why narrative matters. The second is accountability. And I think we must, as Africans, demand that our governments work for us.
Yeah.
And our taxes that we pay have to deliver for us. And this is where data comes in, where informed advocates at all aspects of the ecosystem come in, but also that we're linking election wins to results.
Yeah.
When I started Leap Africa 25 years ago, I used to tell people leadership is an act, not a position. I used to differentiate between rulers and leaders. And I still believe we have a lot of rulers on our continent, not leaders. A leader has a vision that galvanizes others to work together to achieve that vision, to effect change in the lives of people. And we need more leaders who are in legacy mode, who are thinking, how will my grandchildren celebrate what I did on the continent? Some of our pioneer leaders on the continent, we talk about them today in glowing terms because they laid a foundation for what the future should be. We need more people to step into leadership in our continent. And we as citizens need to hold them accountable to do that. And then the final thing I'll say is, ultimately, when you think about the time we're in, we as Africa also need solidarity from across the world. I heard a wise person say during Accra, said, there's no sovereignty without solidarity. And that's why at One, we still push for partnerships with Africa, but partnerships that are enabling the continent to achieve its highest potential, not transactional partnerships. And this is where we have to make sure that as we're changing the rules of the game on the continent, we're also changing the rules of global trade so that they're fair and they're transparent and accountable, and there's no double standard. Treat African farmers like you treat farmers in the Netherlands. Treat farmers in Nigeria like you treat farmers in the Netherlands, right? Or farmers in the United States. Same with rules around value addition, energy access. African children deserve the same opportunities as children in North America or children in Europe. And so I think for me, that's where solidarity and sovereignty come to play, and where the partnerships at the G20 with African Union having a seat, where a voice at the G7 matters, and where we must continue to push for not only fair financing, equitable trade, but also growth that enables all of us to rise together.
All right. You mentioned about farmers and trade, and I know you're passionate about food systems and transformation in that regard. When we see the developments, especially on global trade, I think the EU implemented CBAM just the other day, which potentially will affect a lot of farmers and producers in the African continent, the carbon border adjustment mechanism. When you think about food systems, how do you see it as a convergence point for, climate, for the geopolitics, job resilience, and the whole green transition conversation that we're talking about? Because I know that food systems and food security sits at the core of our people's well-being and transformation as a continent. What are your thoughts around that?
So much to say. I really believe Africa is naturally endowed for agricultural excellence. And there's no reason why we should not be feeding ourselves and the world. There's no reason. And when I think about why we are in the state we're in, where some of our countries are still net importers of food, it comes back to what you've just described. Fractured ecosystems, a commitment by many governments to support commodities and not food self-sufficiency, a prioritization of value chains that are revenue generators from the rest of the world, but are also exposed to these shocks, and the lack of our ability to transition to a state where we're climate resilient. And I've been frustrated because the work I've done for the last 20 years, I see governments changing policies that set us back. And I think that ecosystem approach to food and food security and even nutrition security is non-negotiable. I'll use Nigeria as an example. We've worked so hard for the last 20 years to not only increase yields for our farmers by giving access to improved seeds, nutrition, training, financing, support, and building our very vibrant ecosystems. And then one day, Ministry of Finance gives import quotas to like 5 families to basically flood the market with what we can produce locally. Now they're over-indexing on their ability to get revenue from tariffs and quotas, but then they're killing the same farmers. And then they turn around and want to take a World Bank loan to cushion the effects of the subsidy removals. I mean, it is just, for me, a very, very sad story. And I've challenged many governments that on one hand, you're saying you want to help farmers. On another hand, you're actually destroying their livelihoods. And so that ecosystem policymaking, using data to follow the money, follow the progress, and ensure long-term perspectives is critical. But we can't just do these on our countries. We have to do it at a regional level and a global level. And we have Dr. Okonjo-Iweala at the head of the WTO, and she is fighting for Africa and for fair trading rules. But unfortunately, we're not seeing many countries come alongside. And so when I think about what needs to change in the sector, it's who is the coalition of the willing, who are willing to really put the needs of the farmers and their families and nutrition security of our people at the forefront. And how can we design and implement and follow through in the long term on all that we know we should be doing? And we know there was cut up, it's supposed to be 10%. Of your GDP in ag. Most countries are down 0.5%, not even up to 1% on ag, which is the largest employer. And yet we're importing food and entertaining the WFP and coming into our countries. When a WFP comes into your country, it means you've failed your people. So for me, I can go on and on this. We know what we should be doing as Africans. We just need the political will at the local level, at the national level, and globally to put our people first and deliver on the dividends and ensure that this becomes a source of growth for regional trade, but also for income for our people.
What opportunities do you see in regard to sustainable agriculture, climate smart agriculture? How does it plug into this conversation? What sort of potential do you see from your perspective?
There's so many examples of where we're seeing this work. I mean, just at the School World Forum, we had food for education being recognized and honored right here in Kenya. And food for education is just an example of how innovations can thrive. There's another equivalent in Rwanda. And why Solid Africa is even more amazing is because it's focused on nutrition security sourced from farmers in Rwanda and investing in climate smart agriculture for those farmers. And so you see a full cycle of what can happen. You're sourcing locally, you're providing nutritious food for children in school, they're able to thrive, and then you're also displacing imports. And that way you're creating jobs for the people on the ground. And the Rockefeller Foundation has been doing a lot with our homegrown school feeding program. We've made a big bet on this. And we're partnering with governments, private sector, and civil society in countries around the world to say, can we use school feeding as an entry point? And I think that's such a powerful entry point because you're teaching the young people in the schools about climate smart agriculture. You're investing in their parents who are farmers to produce the food that then goes into the ecosystem. You're creating markets that work, and you're ensuring like a whole ecosystem that's thriving and that can be scaled by government support, by private sector support, and civil society support. And then we're also bringing African philanthropists to enter the ecosystem. For me, that gives me a lot of hope, and I'm proud of the work that our social innovators are doing alongside our philanthropists and our governments. Another one is through an organization I created called African Food Changemakers. African Food Changemakers is a digital platform that not only provides data, funding, training for food and ag entrepreneurs. We have entrepreneurs in 49 African countries. We have over 9,000 active entrepreneurs. And through our BRACE program, we've enabled them to build climate smart, resilient businesses, and we're enabling them to scale. And the examples across the continent of these. Now, what they need to do is scale their impact, scale their messaging, and also shape policies in their countries to ensure that we all rise together.
And a lot of these are driven by young people, which shows the potential in the green transition.
Definitely. The young people get it. They understand that climate change is real, and that it's part of our future and part of our present, and we have to design systems that are resilient and that can survive in them. But that there's also money at the end of it. Before we used to see, oh, if I have to become resilient and climate smart, I'm going to have to spend a lot of money and it doesn't make business sense. Now it actually sets you apart. You're less dependent on fuel. So a crisis in the Middle East does not increase your operating costs because you have green energy. You're less dependent on the rest of the world because you're sourcing locally. And that resilience allows you to withstand shocks. So it makes business sense. And young people are demonstrating that today more than ever before.
Yeah. As we near the end of this conversation, which I would really love to last forever, in this moment in time, what must Africa build for itself now as old assumptions on development weaken and new possibilities emerge? What must the continent build for itself now?
Well, the first thing is we must change our mindsets from a dependency on aid and other continents to a dependency on ourselves. We must elevate our voices and speak with one voice about the Africa we want. That vision we have set, we must implement it. The second is we must galvanize local resources. That's why the theme on money, markets, and mindsets is so relevant. The funding is available on the continent. It has to be unlocked from pension funds. It has to be unlocked from regional and national banks. It has to be unlocked from diaspora to grow our continent. It has to be strategically invested. And that's why the role of catalytic homegrown philanthropy can play a critical role. And then we need to ease the opportunities for collaboration, make it easy for us to partner, make it easy for civil society, for the private sector to work across the board, leveraging trade, leveraging cross-sector collaborations, and ensuring that we scale what works, not our work. That where we started today in this conversation still is so relevant. There are things that are working on our continent. How do we scale them? And how do we ensure that we come back with results of impact on the lives of those who matter the most because of what we've done together?
I know you also spoke earlier of the urgency of innovation in this moment, the urgency of innovative partnerships, and why it matters right now. Why do you think that is so critical?
Because we are facing a debt crisis on our continent. 30 countries are really facing debt distress. There's no way out unless we ourselves fix our systems. And we need to grow our economies. We need to create jobs for our young people. And our young people are crying out. And we want to transform their hopelessness into agency. And so I feel a sense of urgency every day I walk around cities on our continent. I see the hopelessness in the eyes of some of our young people because I know what they carry inside. And I am convinced that those of us who have the opportunity to make a difference can turn that into not only impact, but ensure that our young people are the workforce for the continent, but also the workforce for the world. This inflection point with multiple crises in our world leaves us with no other alternative than to step in and turn this crisis into impact, into action, and into sustained change.
What do you hope is not lost in this inflection point? You know, as conversations come from left and right and drastic changes are made, what do you hope?
We cannot lose our humanity. In my language, Igbo, love is translated into I see you in my eyes. It's a powerful phrase.
Can you say that in Igbo?
Ahurum ginanya. I see you in my eyes. And it means I think about you, but I see you as a human being. I think we must not lose humanity. The ability to see people, especially the most vulnerable, every single day as we design, as we plan, as we aspire, as we climb, as we achieve. Do not leave those who need us the most behind. We're called for such a time as this to create inclusive growth that carries everyone along, especially our children, our elderly. In this society, they need us to fight for them. So see them, plan for them, dream for them, and let's scale together.
You finished your other presentation by saying, I am no longer asking God to give me
Yes.
the
Serenity to
to
accept,
the
yes.
things that I cannot change, which talks about a refusal to conform,
Yes.
and to just accept things as they are. I want you to repeat that quote and just mention why it matters so much in
Okay.
this moment.
Well, it's a quote that inspires me. It's not my quote. A young
Yeah.
African speaking to a president said, I'm no longer asking God to grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change.
Yeah.
I'm asking the Almighty to grant me the wisdom and courage to change the things I cannot accept. It's from an Irish prayer, but it changes that Irish prayer.
Yeah.
And why does it inspire me? Because every day we need courage and wisdom to change the things we cannot accept. Courage gives us the ability to step into rooms, oftentimes where there's no seats for us, and push for change. It gives us a sense of urgency to challenge the status quo, to raise our voices, to galvanize others. And that's what we do at One. Courage is needed more than ever before because we're living in a very interesting time where there are rulers around the world who are distorting the world as we knew it once existed.
Yeah.
The second, wisdom. You have to know the strategies to utilize. It's not always marching in the streets that gets you the answer. It's allies, unlikely allies, galvanizing them. It's using data appropriately. It's using persuasion. It's having alternative narratives. It's pre-bunking stereotypes.
Yeah.
And that's where wisdom comes in. What toolbox and what aspects of your toolbox do you utilize to make change happen? But now, more than ever before, I am asking God for that courage and wisdom. And I hope that those who are listening to this will also do the same. Ask God for the courage and wisdom to change the things you cannot accept in your ecosystem, in your workplace, in your industry, in your country, and act alongside others to make that change happen. Be in legacy mindset and legacy mode, saying, what will my grandchildren say I did? Because I walked on this earth, what change will they remember that I made to improve the lives of others?
Okay. Thank you so much.